Now the land we are meeting on today, there's carbon dating archaeological evidence that people have been meeting here and sharing knowledge for 30,000 years, which is pretty impressive, huh? So, but for those of you who are new to Australia, how many people is it your first time in Australia here? Ah, excellent! Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today and tomorrow you're going to have the opportunity to meet and learn from all these amazing members of your community, both on stage and when you end up chatting over in coffee and here and there and about the place. So, me, yes, who is this person who's been ringing bells at you already? What? My name is Lynette, and I'm super excited to be here as your MC for the conference. And I'm amazed already at a huge amount of skill and expertise that's in this room. So I'm planning to learn from all of you as well, so be prepared. So a little bit about myself. After my postgrad, I've been working for about 16 years in the tech industry with an international career, still in the UK, which has journeyed through roles I've been, I'm a bit nervous, I'm gathering my words. I've worked in tech support, in training and knowledge management, and then my career careered into content design, which is where I am at the moment, at Atlassian. Now, during the day, I manage an awesome team of content designers who are responsible for Jira Cloud products. Some of them are over there in the corner. I'm quite excited about. And during the night, well, like many of you, I hold just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So the facilities are located through this door, go round and that way to the right, and that's where you'll find the facilities. There are also plenty of opportunities throughout the day to take a break, so don't worry too much, but if you do need to get up, just feel free, you don't have to put your hand up to leave or anything like that. In case of emergency, we need to evacuate through those doors, cross the road at Phillip Street and go to the forecourt. That's our assembly point over there. Food, a subject close to many people's hearts, including my own. We make sure you don't go hungry. There's going to be morning and afternoon teas that's going to be over there in that room. And there's also some nibbles if you're joining us later on for the social event, but I'll talk more about that in a little while. Now, one thing that we've learned is that in past conferences, if we have too many questions, the presentations drag on, we run over time. So we have prioritised getting as many people talking as possible over answering questions. So if you've got a burning question for one of the presenters, I speak very well, the presenters, then do feel free to grab them at one of the break times in there. And that also gives you a bit of extra time to work out the words of your question, which is very important in these areas. Now, one thing we've also got is the Pac-Man rule. Now, some of you might be too young to remember Pac-Man. Back in the day, little yellow character goes around munching things. Be like Pac-Man when you're having a chat with people here. Always leave a little gap in the circle so that somebody else can join you. There's a lot of people here who don't know each other. It's super uncomfortable to just walk up to a group of people that are close and be like, please, can I'm listening. So leave that gap so everyone can join in. And also, if somebody does join, could you let them know what you're talking about so they're not just kind of, okay, clicker magic. So, we've got a load of sponsors. Yay! We've got allowed this conference to happen at the price point that it does happen at. So, not only do they provide financial support, but they also really stand behind good documentation and documentarians as well. So we'll also be hearing talks from people who work at some of these organisations, and the Right Docs team here do genuinely believe in the products and services these sponsors offer. And we really appreciate their support in making events like this happen. So, if you could join me in thanking these people with a round of applause. my words are not as optimal today as they may normally be. Each presentation is 30 minutes with a 5-minute bump in for the next speaker. They're all going to be happening right here in this room. And do remember, we try and avoid questions at the end of the presentation. You hold those till lunch. Now, speaking of presenters, if you're on stage today, you'll get a 5-minute warning with something obvious. So do keep your eyes and ears out. And if any of you are sitting down there and thinking, oh gosh, this woman's fumbling over her words a bit, I could do better than that, I could give a talk, I could give a talk. Please do, I can talks. So you can write down what sort of talk you'd like to do, and we'll have a receptacle ready at the foyer, I believe.
Yeah.
So if you've got something you'd love to talk about for 5 minutes, write your name down, put it in the hat, we're going to draw out people, and you will get your chance to speak. This is especially awesome if you've never spoken to a crowd before, because as you've already seen, this group of people is lovely and very accepting of word stumbles and things like that. So I really, really do encourage you to come up here and give it a go. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is your talk might inspire somebody else. So sell your pitch well, and you'll be seeing the crowd from this position. Now, if you've got an idea that will be longer than about 5 minutes, then, or you want some input from other people around you, the hive mind, as some call it, then you might be interested in our unconference stream. So this stream is happening in parallel to the workshop stream, and it allows you to opt out of any of the workshops that you might be like, oh yeah, I've done this before, it's excellent, but I don't want to do it again. And there are a few different forms of unconference that you can do. So what you need to do, if you're interested in unconference, is seek out Catherine Huish. Could you? Hewish. Catherine Hewish, if you are interested, and she is right down there at the back. So I did mention the social thing earlier. This is the details. Between 6 and 8, we are going to be going to the Hearts pub on the corner of Essex and Gloucester Street. And the drinks and nibbles are catered for until the tag runs out. I've not yet had coffee today, and my apologies, my friends. But we do have 50 seats reserved, and we can accommodate more if we need to. But do make sure you bring your tag, because this event is for conference attendees only. On to Swapnil.
Thanks, that's pretty good. So my name is Swapnil, and I started off with a bunch of friends around in this room, the Write the Docs Australia in 2016. For those who don't know me, I'm a technical writer by day, by night. Pretty much, that's the only skill I know. So I've been a part of tech writing communities in Australia for over 15 years, but I'd like to see this wonderful community grow, and because there's no way documentation is going anywhere from what we've seen. It's re-emerging, it's been around, it's just there. We need a community. So I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes just talk about what Write the Docs is for people who haven't been to one of our events before. It's a series of conferences and meetups that happen all over the world related to documentation. So anyone who cares about the quality of documentation, the art of documentation, is what we call a documentarian. So your title at work is, it's not important, it's what you do. If you love documentation, you're a documentarian, you're a part of this community, which allows us to expand the view that job titles are pretty much not important, but a culture of good documentation is. So we've got, and I don't think I've been updating this pretty regularly, but it's a rough map of where meetups happen. Like I say, it happens everywhere. The annual conferences happen in Portland and Prague, and we've been having this conference in Australia. This is our 3rd year, so yeah, good on us for having it for 3 years in a row. How do you get involved with Write the Docs globally? So there's a few things you can do. You can sign up on the mailing list. You can look up meetup events on our page, or you can look around 100 plus Slack channels if that's your thing. If you're also keen to be a part of a podcast, we've got Jared Morgan who runs the Write the Docs podcast, and he's done a fantastic job of this. So if you're keen on recording some of your experience, feel free to introduce yourself to Jared. So let's talk about Write the Docs Australia quickly. I'm aware that we're sort of just running behind a little bit, but this is completely our community. It is what we make out of it. It has its origins in Portland, modeled on other sort of open source communities, and we've largely benefited from all the knowledge that we've got from these communities, and we try and adapt it to our unique Australian landscape. So in a recent podcast, a fellow documentarian, he actually commented, Australia seems to be always punching well above its weight, which is true because for a sort of a smallish nation, when we know we've got a set number of people doing documentation, we're doing really well, so I'm really happy with that. And like I said, for the last 3.5 years, we've had meetup events across Melbourne and Sydney regularly, Brisbane. We've had a one-off event in Adelaide and Perth as well, and we'd like to see more events happening. So if anyone's here traveling from Adelaide or Perth and if you want to take up more events and take up that responsibility, feel free to get in touch. Here's a snapshot of what we've done. We've got about close to 700 members across Australia. Not all of them turn up, which will be fantastic if we can fill a room with 700 people. But what I mean is we've got about 700 people who've signed up for meetup events, and depending on topics and what sort of fancies their interest in documentation, they turn up for events. We've had 40 events in the last 3 years, which is again a really good thing. We've spoken about all sorts of topics around documentation, markdown, localization, APIs, UX, UI, everything. And we also have remote events every year. So people from Australia, we've got like a big remote event happening in Australia where anyone throughout Australia can sign up. We've had people from New Zealand join in a couple of times, and we've also had presenters from US and Singapore present webinars for Write the Docs. Just a quick note on the code of conduct. It's dedicated to providing a harassment-free experience regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, or religion. So we come from all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures and thoughts, and we've all got our opinions. And it's always great to be supportive of each other, respect what a fellow documentarian brings to the table. So always be open to new ideas. It may spark off something that's bothering you at a workplace, and it could provide you impetus to go on and change something that you can do at your workplace. If you do believe someone's violating this code of conduct, feel free to get in touch with me or Sam, who's our code of conduct coordinator today. So feel free to get in touch with us offline, and we'll try and address your issues. And yeah, definitely sort of do this. The idea of today is to relax, try and get away from work. I don't know how many of us can actually do that. We're always documenting, we're always looking at faults and presentations or whatever typos, but try and relax, de-stress, learn something new. Maybe you'll all go back and do something similar at your workplace and share your experiences. So that's pretty much me. We've got a couple of hashtags there. If you want to follow up on Twitter, there'll be a lot of action happening on Twitter as well. So that's pretty much it. That's all from me. Thank you.